In this module, we explore the way that we can get the Bourne shell to actually do numerical calculations, or in other words, arithmetic. Now, I did mention to you before that the Bourne shell actually has no notion of a number, which means, of course, that all the variables in the Bourne shell programming are strings. They're not integers or anything like that. Now, because there's no notion of a number, there's no notion of a numerical calculation, at least not with the Bourne shell just by itself. There is actually another Unix program that we can use in conjunction with the Bourne shell called EXPR, which is designed to fill that gap, to provide the facility to do numerical calculations. And this is what it looks like. If you've got the $prompt up, your shell prompt, you can just type in EXPR and then your particular calculation that you're interested in. In this case, we would be multiplying 3 by 4, and EXPR would give the answer of 12. Let's have a brief look at that in action. So I could do, of course, EXPR 1 plus 2 and get an answer of 3. Now, I could also do EXPR of, say, something like 3 times 4. Now I get a syntax error. Now, why do I get a syntax error with that? Is it because I've used the wrong symbol for multiplication? Well, actually I haven't. The asterisk, or the star symbol, is in fact the correct symbol for multiplication. The problem is that the shell actually examines that line before EXPR ever gets a hold of it and notices the star there. So what it does is it uses that star as a wildcard and replaces that with the names of all the files in the current directory, which is not what we want. So in order to prevent it doing that, we can either put a backslash before it, or we can put single quotes around it. I'll just put a backslash before it because it's simpler. EXPR 3 times 4, and that gives us 12. Asterisk is actually the only one that we need to worry about. The minus sign and the plus and the divide by are all perfectly okay. And it's very important that you remember that you must have spaces around all of the arguments to EXPR. You cannot do this, EXPR 1 times 2, like that. You'll just get 1 times 2, which is not really what you want. And your arithmetic expressions can actually be quite complex, can be involved. You can even use brackets, of course, but brackets are another special character for use with the shell, so you'd have to put a backslash in front of any bracket that you used as well. So how does EXPR actually work in conjunction with variables? Well, it's not too much of a stretch of the imagination to come up with an example like this. Set a variable called a to be equal to 15, say, and set a variable called b to be equal to 3. Now, if we want to actually take 15 and divide it by 3, and then put the answer back into another variable called c, we can actually do that, but we have to put the EXPR expression inside back quotes. Let's go through that worked example in a live shell. What we'd really like to be able to do is just go a equals 15 and b equals 3, and what we'd like to be able to do is c equals, say, $A divided by $B. But you can't do that. We have to use EXPR in there as well. So we could say EXPR $A divided by $B. And that works fine. But that does not assign the value to the variable called c. It simply prints it on the screen. So if we want to assign it to the value of c, then we have to do it like this, put it inside back quotes. EXPR $A divided by $B. And this time we don't get any output at all, but it's fairly safe to assume that the variable called c has been assigned that value. Let's find out whether it has. Echo $C, and it is equal to 5, which is correct. So that's about all you need to know about EXPR. It's a very simple little program. There's a few little things you've got to watch out for, like the back quotes and the quotes around the asterisk or the backward slash or whatever it is. It does take a little bit of getting used to, especially if you're used to using another programming language that supports numerical calculations natively, but we don't have that luxury. So what I'd like to show you now is a simple way that you can use this EXPR program in conjunction with a loop. Because what we very often want to be able to do is cause a loop to repeat its code block a certain number of times. Like we might simply want to count up from 1 to 100 or something similar. And this is how you do that in the shell. Let's say we read in from the keyboard the maximum number of times we'd like to go around the loop, and so the user maybe enters 45. Then we set our loop counter to be equal to 1. And I've made a little mistake there on the screen. There's not supposed to be any spaces around that equal sign, but let's assume that I equals 1 there. And we now use the numerical facility built into the test program. Test is quite capable of comparing two numbers to see if one is greater than or equal to or less than the other one. So what we're essentially saying is here, while I is less than or equal to count, that's the minus LE is less than or equal to, then we can, I don't know, print out a message or anything like that that says loop number I of count, so that might actually print out this is loop 1 of 45, this is loop 2 of 45, and so on. And then the key part of this whole code snippet that you're looking at is the next line, which essentially says I equals I plus 1. But we have to do it in a rather complex way, as we saw before. We have to use expr $I plus 1 with the space around the plus. We have to enclose the lot around inside back quotes, and then we assign that, using no spaces around the equal sign, to the value I. That might look like a complex way of doing a very simple thing, but that's exactly what we have to do in the shell if we want to loop a certain number of times. For those experienced programmers amongst you, you'd be probably used to using a for loop to achieve this effect, but in the shell, the for loop is actually used for a completely different purpose, which we'll see next.